It was a quiet morning just like any other. The sun rose over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Birds chirped lazily as people around the world began their day. In New York City, commuters hurried to catch buses and trains. In rural Kansas, farmers prepared their fields for planting. Life on Earth went on as it always had, until everything changed. At exactly 7:42 a.m. UTC, every television, radio, and internet-connected device across the globe suddenly switched off whatever program or website it was displaying. Instead, a single image appeared, a massive alien ship hovering above Earth's atmosphere. Its metallic surface gleamed menacingly under the sunlight, and its sheer size dwarfed even the largest human-made structures. For several seconds, there was silence. Then came the voice. "Attention, inhabitants of this planet." The deep, resonant tone boomed through speakers everywhere. "We are the Xylari Empire. Your species has been deemed unworthy of continued independence. Surrender now, or face annihilation." The announcement sent shockwaves throughout humanity. People froze where they stood, staring at screens with wide eyes. Some laughed nervously, thinking it was an elaborate prank. Others panicked, rushing to grab loved ones or stockpile supplies. Governments scrambled to respond, but no one knew what to do. This wasn't something anyone had ever prepared for. In Washington, D.C., Jack Morgan sat alone in his cluttered office at the Department of Advanced Defense Technologies. Papers were strewn across his desk, along with half-empty coffee cups and scattered blueprints. Jack was a man who preferred machines to people. He spent most of his days tinkering with experimental gadgets, trying to push the boundaries of what humanity could achieve. Right now, though, he wasn't focused on innovation. Like everyone else, he stared blankly at the screen mounted on his wall, replaying the message over and over again. "This can't be real," he muttered to himself, running a hand through his messy brown hair, but deep down, he knew it was. The technology behind that ship, if you could even call it a ship, was far beyond anything humans had ever seen. It wasn't just advanced, it was incomprehensible. And if these aliens called themselves an empire, they likely weren't bluffing about their intentions. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in Nevada, Rachel Dawson was suiting up for another routine training exercise. She was a fighter pilot stationed at Area 51, though she hated when people joked about her workplace being some kind of UFO hotspot. To Rachel, it was simply home base, a place where she honed her skills flying cutting-edge aircraft. Today's mission involved practicing dogfights against simulated enemy jets, nothing out of the ordinary. As she climbed into the cockpit of her F-35 Lightning II, however, the same broadcast interrupted her pre-flight checks. Rachel frowned, leaning back in her seat. Something about the voice didn't sit right with her. It wasn't angry or hateful, it was cold, calculated, almost bored. Whoever these aliens were, they clearly thought very little of humanity. "Control tower, did you catch that?" Rachel asked into her headset. "We all did, Captain Dawson," replied Lieutenant Harper, her commanding officer. "Hold position until further orders." Rachel obeyed, though every fiber of her being screamed to take action. Sitting still felt wrong when the world seemed to be falling apart. Minutes ticked by agonizingly slowly before the order finally came. "Return to base immediately." When Rachel landed, she found the hangar buzzing with activity. Pilots and technicians huddled together, discussing strategies and speculating about the invaders' next move. No one had answers, only questions. Back in D.C., Jack received a call summoning him to an emergency meeting at the Pentagon. He grabbed his coat and headed out, locking the door behind him without bothering to tidy up. On the drive over, his mind raced. What could humanity possibly offer in defense against such overwhelming power? Even the best military hardware on Earth would be useless against those ships, unless someone thought outside the box. Jack had been working on a project codenamed Phoenix, a prototype energy shield designed to protect cities from orbital bombardment. Up until now, it had been considered impractical due to cost and technical limitations. But desperate times called for desperate measures. If anyone could make it work, it was him. When Jack arrived at the conference room, he found himself surrounded by high-ranking officials, scientists, and military personnel. Everyone looked tense, speaking in hushed tones. At the head of the table stood General Edwards, a grizzled veteran with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He wasted no time getting down to business. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we're facing an existential threat unlike anything in history. These Xylari claim they'll destroy us if we don't surrender. Frankly, I don't see how giving up is an option. So here's the plan. We fight back. We hit them where it hurts and show them we're not going down without a damn good fight." A murmur rippled through the room. While courage was admirable, many doubted whether humanity stood a chance. That's when Jack raised his hand hesitantly. "General, if I may," he said, standing up. All eyes turned to him. "I've been developing something that might help. It's called Project Phoenix, an energy shield capable of deflecting attacks from space. It's not ready yet, but with enough resources, I believe I can accelerate its completion." The room fell silent. General Edwards studied Jack carefully before nodding. "Do it," he said firmly. "You'll have whatever you need." With renewed purpose, Jack returned to his lab later that evening. He dove headfirst into his work, fueled by adrenaline and determination. Hours blurred into days as he fine-tuned equations and ran simulations. Every setback only made him more resolute. Somewhere out there, ordinary people were counting on him to deliver hope. He couldn't let them down. While Jack worked tirelessly, Rachel found herself assigned to a new squadron tasked with testing unconventional tactics against the invaders. Her unit consisted of the best pilots from various branches of the military, each bringing unique skills to the table. Their leader was Major Lewis, a seasoned combat veteran known for his unorthodox methods. During their first briefing, he laid out his vision plainly. "These aliens think they're untouchable," Major Lewis said, pacing in front of the group. "They expect us to roll over and die. Well, screw that. We're gonna hit them hard, fast, and dirty, use whatever tricks we've got. Make them regret ever showing up here." Rachel nodded, feeling a spark of excitement ignite within her. For the first time since the invasion began, she felt like they actually had a shot. Maybe not a great one, but a shot nonetheless. Days passed, and tensions escalated. The Xylari hadn't launched any attacks yet, but their presence loomed ominously overhead. News outlets reported sightings of smaller ships descending into Earth's atmosphere, presumably scouting potential targets. Protests erupted worldwide, with citizens demanding action from their leaders. Fear mingled with anger, creating a volatile mix. Then, disaster struck. Without warning, one of the alien vessels fired upon a civilian airliner carrying hundreds of passengers. The plane exploded mid-air, raining debris over the ocean below. Panic gripped the globe as footage of the attack spread like wildfire. Official statements claimed it was a miscommunication, but few believed it. The message was clear. The Xylari weren't interested in diplomacy. They wanted domination. In response, President Collins addressed the nation, vowing retaliation. "We will not bow to tyranny," she declared passionately. "Every resource available will be dedicated to defending our planet. Together, we will prevail." Her words inspired millions, but skepticism remained. Could humanity truly stand up to such an advanced foe? Or were they doomed to extinction? For Jack, Rachel, and countless others, the answer lay in action. As night fell once more, Jack continued refining Project Phoenix, determined to turn science fiction into reality. Across the country, Rachel prepared her squadron for battle, knowing full well the odds stacked against them. Neither dared to give up, not when so much depended on their efforts. And so, amidst fear and uncertainty, humanity braced itself for the fight of its life. The Xylari had come for Earth, but they hadn't counted on humanity's indomitable spirit. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: the coming days would shape the fate of the entire planet. The days following the destruction of the civilian airliner felt like living in a nightmare. The Xylari had shown their true colors, and humanity was left reeling. Governments around the world convened emergency sessions, debating how to respond to an enemy that seemed unstoppable. In homes, schools, and workplaces, people whispered about what might happen next. Some believed surrender was inevitable. Others clung to hope, refusing to accept defeat without a fight. Jack Morgan barely slept during this time. His lab became his entire world as he poured every ounce of energy into Project Phoenix. The prototype shield wasn't perfect. It still flickered under heavy strain, but it was progressing faster than he'd ever imagined possible. With unlimited funding and access to top-tier engineers, Jack worked around the clock. Fueled by coffee and sheer willpower, he knew failure wasn't an option. If the shield failed, millions could die. One evening, as Jack adjusted the power settings on the device, Sarah Bennett walked into the lab. She was one of the brightest minds at the facility, with sharp green eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. Though they hadn't always seen eye to eye, she respected Jack's determination and shared his drive to protect humanity. "You look like you haven't eaten in days," Sarah said, placing a sandwich on his desk. "Take a break before you collapse." Jack glanced up briefly but didn't stop typing commands into his computer. "I can't afford breaks right now," he replied tersely. "Every second counts." Sarah sighed, leaning against the table. "You're not doing anyone any good if you burn out. Trust me, I've been there. Besides, we need fresh eyes on this thing. 2 heads are better than 1. Reluctantly, Jack paused and turned to face her. He realized she was right. He couldn't do everything alone. Together, they reviewed the data, discussing ways to stabilize the energy output. Their collaboration proved fruitful almost immediately. By combining Jack's engineering expertise with Sarah's theoretical knowledge, they identified several key improvements that could make the shield more reliable. As dawn broke outside, Jack allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. For the first time, he believed Project Phoenix might actually work. But even as hope grew, so did the urgency. The Xylari weren't waiting patiently. They were planning their next move. Meanwhile, Rachel Dawson and her squadron trained relentlessly. Their base buzzed with activity as pilots drilled new maneuvers designed to exploit weaknesses in the Xylari ships. Major Lewis pushed them hard, demanding perfection. "We don't get second chances," he reminded them constantly. "If we screw this up, it's game over." Rachel took his words to heart. Every flight simulation, every tactical briefing brought her closer to understanding their enemy. The Xylari ships were fast and heavily armed, but they weren't invincible. Human ingenuity and adaptability were their greatest assets, if only they could find the right strategy. One afternoon, Rachel received orders to attend a high-level meeting at Area 51's command center. When she arrived, she found herself surrounded by military brass, scientists, and government officials. At the front of the room stood General Edwards, who wasted no time getting to the point. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we're running out of time. Intelligence suggests the Xylari are preparing for a full-scale assault. We need to hit them first. Captain Dawson's squadron has volunteered to lead the charge." Rachel straightened in her seat, heart pounding. Leading the charge sounded noble, but she knew the risks. This mission would likely result in heavy casualties, if not total annihilation. Still, she nodded stoically, ready to do whatever it took. General Edwards continued, "Our goal is simple. Disrupt their formations and buy us enough time to deploy defensive measures. Captain Dawson, your team will use EMP bursts and decoy drones to confuse their targeting systems. It won't be easy, but it's our best shot." After the meeting, Rachel met with her squadron to go over the plan. Faces were grim, but resolve burned brightly in everyone's eyes. They understood the stakes and accepted the danger willingly. As Rachel addressed them, her voice steady and confident, she felt a surge of pride. "We're outnumbered and outgunned," she said, pacing in front of the group. "But we've got something they don't, guts. We'll show them what humanity is made of. Stick to the plan, trust each other, and let's make history." The night before the attack, Rachel lay awake, in her bunk staring at the ceiling. Thoughts raced through her mind, memories of loved ones, fears of failure, dreams of victory. She thought about the civilians counting on her, the pilots flying beside her, and the countless lives hanging in the balance. Finally, exhaustion claimed her, pulling her into a restless sleep. Dawn arrived too soon. Pilots suited up in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Rachel climbed into her cockpit, gripping the controls tightly. Adrenaline coursed through her veins as engines roared to life. One by one, the jets taxied down the runway and soared into the sky, heading toward the alien fleet. From the ground, Jack watched the launch from a secure observation deck. News of the impending battle had spread quickly, and the facility was eerily quiet. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see if their efforts would pay off. Jack clenched his fists, silently praying for success. High above Earth, Rachel led her squadron into position. The Xylari ships loomed ahead, massive and menacing. Her heart pounded as she gave the signal to engage. The first wave of EMP bursts detonated, sending electromagnetic pulses rippling through space. Several alien vessels faltered, their systems temporarily disabled. Decoy drones zipped past, drawing fire away from the human fighters. For a brief moment, chaos erupted among the Xylari ranks. Rachel seized the opportunity, diving low to avoid enemy fire while launching missiles at a nearby cruiser. Explosions lit up the void as metal fragments tumbled through zero gravity. Cheers echoed through her headset as her teammates reported hits. But the celebration was short-lived. The Xylari recovered quickly, regrouping with terrifying efficiency. Laser beams sliced through space, narrowly missing Rachel's jet. Alarms blared as a missile grazed her wing, forcing her to bank sharply. Around her, pilots fought valiantly, but losses mounted rapidly. "Fall back," Rachel shouted, realizing the situation was becoming untenable. "Regroup at Rally Point Alpha." Her squadron obeyed, retreating just as reinforcements arrived. Though battered and bruised, they had succeeded in their objective, disrupting the Xylari formation long enough for Earth to prepare its defenses. As Rachel landed safely back at base, she felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Many brave souls hadn't returned, their sacrifice etched forever in her memory. Back at the lab, Jack and Sarah monitored the effects of Project Phoenix. The shield had successfully protected Los Angeles from an orbital strike, proving its potential to safeguard major cities. Relief washed over Jack as he watched the data stream in. For the first time, humanity had a tangible weapon against the invaders. That evening, news of both the battle and the shield's success spread worldwide. People cheered in the streets, inspired by the bravery of the pilots and the ingenuity of scientists like Jack. Hope flickered anew, fragile yet defiant. The Xylari had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. As Rachel reflected, on the day's events she couldn't help but feel proud. Despite overwhelming odds, they had struck a blow against the invaders. Jack, meanwhile, vowed to keep improving Project Phoenix, knowing the war was far from over. Together, humanity stood united, determined to reclaim its future. Though challenges lay ahead, one truth shone brightly. The Empire had come for Earth, but they hadn't counted on humanity's response. The victory in space, though small, had ignited a spark of hope across the planet. News of Rachel Dawson's squadron's bravery and Jack Morgan's successful deployment of Project Phoenix spread like wildfire. People who had been paralyzed by fear now felt a renewed sense of purpose. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't going down without a fight. But while the triumph inspired millions, it also came at a heavy cost. Dozens of pilots had lost their lives, and the Xylari fleet remained overwhelmingly powerful. The war was far from over. In the days following the battle, resistance movements began to form in cities and towns around the world. Ordinary citizens, teachers, shopkeepers, farmers, and students came together to organize protests, sabotage efforts, and supply networks for those fighting on the front lines. In New York City, a group of engineers converted abandoned warehouses into makeshift factories producing EMP grenades and decoy drones based on designs leaked from Area 51. In rural India, villagers armed with nothing but determination used mirrors and reflective surfaces to blind Xylari scout ships hovering overhead. Everywhere you looked, Humanity was finding ways to push back. Rachel watched these developments unfold from her base in Nevada. She felt a deep sense of pride knowing that people everywhere were stepping up, but she also knew the sacrifices wouldn't end anytime soon. Her squadron had been hit hard during the attack and replacements were still being trained. Each new face reminded her of the friends she'd lost. Still, she refused to let grief slow her down. There was too much at stake. One morning, as Rachel reviewed flight data from the previous mission, Major Lewis approached her. His expression was unusually serious. "We've got intel," he said, handing her a tablet. "The Xylari are shifting tactics. They're sending ground forces to occupy key locations." Rachel scanned the report, her stomach sinking. The aliens weren't just content with dominating from orbit. They were coming down to Earth. This meant direct confrontations with civilians, something Rachel dreaded. The thought of innocent people suffering under alien rule filled her with rage. "They're trying to break us," she muttered, clenching her fists. "If they control enough areas, they'll cut off our ability to resist." Major Lewis nodded grimly. "Exactly. Which is why we need to act fast. Command wants us to focus on disrupting their supply lines and communication hubs. Without those, they'll struggle to coordinate their forces." Rachel understood the logic behind the plan, but it didn't make the task any less daunting. Attacking enemy strongholds would require precision and sacrifice. Two things her squadron couldn't afford to waste. Still, she agreed to lead the effort, knowing someone had to step up. Meanwhile, Jack Morgan and Sarah Bennett worked tirelessly to improve Project Phoenix. The shield had proven effective in protecting Los Angeles, but scaling it up to cover larger areas was proving difficult. Energy consumption was through the roof, and the system occasionally overheated, causing temporary failures. Jack knew they needed a breakthrough if they hoped to defend more than just a handful of cities. Late one night, as Jack pored over schematics, Sarah walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one and sat down beside him. "You look like you're about to pass out," she said, eyeing the dark circles under his eyes. "I'll sleep when this is over," Jack replied, taking a sip. "Right now I need to figure out how to stabilize the energy flow." Sarah studied the blueprints for a moment before speaking. "What if we redirect some of the excess energy into auxiliary systems? It might reduce strain on the main core," Keese considered the idea, nodding slowly. "It's worth a shot. Let's run some simulations." Over the next few hours, they tested Sarah's suggestion, tweaking variables until they found a configuration that worked. The shield's stability improved significantly, allowing them to expand its coverage area. By dawn, they had successfully protected San Francisco from an orbital strike, saving thousands of lives. News of the achievement reached General Edwards, who immediately called Jack and Sarah to Washington, D.C. for a debriefing. When they arrived, they found themselves in a room filled with military leaders, scientists, and government officials. At the head of the table sat President Collins, her face lined with stress, but her voice steady. "Project Phoenix has given us a fighting chance," she said, addressing the group. "But we can't rely on defense alone. We need to take the fight to the Xylari. Admiral Hayes has proposed a bold strategy involving hybrid warships combining human ingenuity with reverse-engineered alien technology. I want your input on how we can integrate Project Phoenix into this plan." Admiral Hayes stepped forward, laying out his vision. He explained that international coalitions had pooled resources to build a fleet capable of matching the Xylari's firepower. These ships would be equipped with advanced weaponry and shields derived from Jack's designs. The goal was to launch a coordinated counteroffensive targeting the invaders' command centers. Jack listened intently, realizing the magnitude of what was being asked. If successful, this could turn the tide of the war, but failure would mean catastrophic losses. He exchanged a glance with Sarah, who gave him a reassuring nod. "We'll do everything we can to support the fleet," Jack promised. "But we'll need time to adapt the shield technology for mobile platforms." "You've got it," Admiral Hayes replied firmly. "Every resource available will be at your disposal." As discussions continued, Rachel received orders to prepare her squadron for a special mission. She gathered her team in the briefing room where Major Lewis outlined the operation. Their objective was simple yet dangerous. Infiltrate a Xylari communications hub disguised as prisoners and plant explosives to disable the facility. This isn't going to be easy, Major Lewis warned. Security will be tight, and if you're caught, there's no backup coming. But if you succeed, you'll cripple their ability to coordinate attacks across multiple regions. Rachel nodded, understanding the risks. She turned to her team, meeting each of their eyes. Volunteers only, she said firmly. This is suicide if we screw it up. To her surprise, every single pilot raised their hand without hesitation. Rachel felt a lump rise in her throat but quickly pushed it aside. All right then, she said, forcing a smile. Let's show them what we're made of. Preparations for the mission took days. Rachel and her team underwent intense training, learning how to mimic Xylari behavior and language based on intercepted transmissions. Engineers modified their uniforms to resemble those worn by captured humans, ensuring they blended in seamlessly. Meanwhile, explosives experts crafted devices small enough to conceal but powerful enough to destroy the hub. On the eve of the mission, Rachel stood alone on the tarmac, staring up at the stars. The weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on her shoulders. She thought about the people counting on her, the families torn apart by the invasion, the soldiers risking their lives daily, the scientists working miracles in labs. She couldn't let them down. Back in DC, Jack and Sarah finalized plans for integrating Project Phoenix into the hybrid warships. They worked side by side, fueled by caffeine and adrenaline, knowing their contributions could mean the difference between victory and defeat. As dawn broke, they shared a quiet moment of reflection. We're actually doing this, Sarah said softly, gazing out the window. We're fighting back. Jack nodded, a rare smile crossing his face. Yeah. And maybe, just maybe, we'll win. Across the globe, humanity prepared for the battles to come. Resistance fighters sharpened their weapons, engineers fine-tuned their creations, and pilots strapped into their cockpits. The Xylari had underestimated Earth, but they were about to learn the true strength of the human spirit. Rachel Dawson and her team stood at the edge of a dense forest, their disguises carefully adjusted one last time. The Xylari communications hub loomed in the distance, its towering structure surrounded by patrols of alien soldiers and automated drones. The air was thick with tension, every rustle of leaves or distant hum of machinery setting nerves on edge. Rachel took a deep breath, steadying herself. This was it. The moment they'd trained for. Remember, she whispered to her team, stay calm, stick to the plan. We get in, plant the charges, and get out. No heroics. Her teammates nodded, silently, their faces hidden beneath hoods meant to mimic captured humans being transported to labor camps. Each carried a small explosive device concealed within their clothing, along with tools designed to disable security systems. It was a risky mission, but if successful, it would deal a crippling blow to the Xylari's ability to coordinate attacks across Earth. The group moved forward cautiously, sticking to the shadows as they approached the perimeter fence. Spotlights swept back and forth, illuminating patches of ground while leaving others cloaked in darkness. Rachel signaled for her team to halt, waiting for the perfect moment to slip through. When the light passed, she motioned them forward, and they darted across the open space, hearts pounding. Reaching the fence, one of the engineers quickly set to work disabling the electric current running through it. His hands trembled slightly, but he worked efficiently, cutting the power just long enough for the team to squeeze through before restoring it behind them. Once inside, they pressed onward, navigating between buildings and avoiding patrols. Every step felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss. Any misstep could mean disaster. As they neared the main building, Rachel spotted a group of Xylari guards, dragging prisoners toward what looked like processing chambers. Her stomach churned at the sight, but she forced herself to focus. Stay low, she murmured, crouching behind a stack of crates. We're almost there. Inside the facility, corridors buzzed with activity. Alien technicians monitored screens, displaying maps and data streams while armed soldiers patrolled the halls. Rachel's team blended in as best they could, keeping their heads down and mimicking the shuffling gait of prisoners. They reached the central control room without incident, slipping inside unnoticed. "Plant the charges here," Rachel instructed, pointing to key points around the room. "Make sure they're timed correctly. We don't want them going off too early." The explosives expert nodded, moving quickly to attach the devices to critical systems. Meanwhile, another member of the team hacked into the surveillance feeds, looping footage to mask their presence. Time seemed to slow as they worked, each second stretching endlessly. Finally, the charges were in place, and the team prepared to leave. Just as they turned to exit, however, alarms blared throughout the facility. Someone must have noticed the tampered footage. Red lights flashed, bathing the room in an eerie glow. Rachel cursed under her breath. "Move!" she shouted, leading the way out. They sprinted down the hallway, dodging bursts of energy fire from pursuing Xylari soldiers. Explosions erupted around them as reinforcements scrambled to intercept. One of Rachel's teammates went down, hit by a stray blast, but she didn't stop to help. There was no time. Survival depended on reaching the extraction point before the charges detonated. Outside, chaos reigned. The forest had become a battlefield, with resistance fighters clashing with Xylari forces sent to investigate the disturbance. Rachel's team fought their way through, relying on quick reflexes and teamwork to stay alive. Bullets whizzed past and laser beams scorched the earth, but they pushed forward relentlessly. Finally, they reached the rendezvous location, a clearing where a transport helicopter awaited. As they climbed aboard, Rachel glanced back at the EI facility. A deafening roar filled the air as the explosives detonated, sending shockwaves rippling outward. Flames engulfed the building, consuming everything inside. The communications hub was gone. The helicopter lifted off just as enemy reinforcements arrived, narrowly escaping the carnage below. Rachel slumped into her seat, exhaustion washing over her. Her team was battered and bruised, but they had succeeded. For now, at least, the Xylari's grip on Earth had been weakened. Back in D.C., Jack Morgan and Sarah Bennett received news of the mission's success. The destruction of the communications hub had disrupted the invaders' coordination, causing confusion among their ranks. Intelligence reports indicated that several occupied zones were experiencing uprisings, as civilian resistance movements seized the opportunity to strike. "That's one less thing for them to worry about," Sarah said, leaning back in her chair. She looked tired, but satisfied. Days of non-stop work had taken their toll, but progress on Project Phoenix continued to accelerate. With refinements made to the energy shield, more cities were now protected from orbital bombardment. Jack nodded, rubbing his temples. "It's not enough, though. We need to keep pushing. Every day we delay, more people die." Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're doing everything you can, Jack. Don't forget that." He managed a faint smile, grateful for her support. Together, they returned to their work, brainstorming ways to adapt the shield technology for use in mobile platforms. Admiral Hayes had requested prototypes capable of protecting warships during upcoming counteroffensives. It was a daunting challenge, but Jack refused to give up. In New York City, meanwhile, grassroots movements gained momentum. Ordinary citizens transformed abandoned warehouses into command centers, coordinating efforts to resist the occupation. Street protests grew larger and bolder, with crowds chanting slogans like "Earth belongs to us" and "Never surrender." Even children joined the cause, painting murals of fighter jets battling alien ships and handing out flyers urging neighbors to stand strong. One such mural caught the attention of Emily Carter, a young artist who had lost her brother in the initial invasion. She stood before the colorful depiction of humanity rising against the invaders, tears streaming down her face. Her grief had once paralyzed her, but now it fueled her determination. Picking up a spray can, she added her own touch to the artwork, a phoenix rising from flames symbolizing hope and resilience. Across the globe, similar acts of defiance inspired millions. In Tokyo, hackers infiltrated Xylari databases, leaking classified information to aid resistance fighters. In London, engineers built makeshift exosuits from salvaged materials, giving ordinary people the ability to fight toe-to-toe with alien soldiers. Everywhere you looked, humanity was finding ways to push back, refusing to accept defeat. As these efforts unfolded, General Edwards convened a meeting with military leaders to discuss the next phase of the counteroffensive. Satellite imagery revealed that the Xylari fleet had regrouped near the moon, likely planning another large-scale attack. Admiral Hayes proposed launching a preemptive strike using the hybrid warships currently under construction. "We can't wait for them to come to us," Hayes argued. "If we hit them hard enough, we might buy ourselves enough time to finish developing our defenses." President Collins listened intently, weighing the risks. "What are the chances of success?" she asked. Hayes hesitated before answering. "Slim, but slim is better than none." After much debate, the decision was made. Humanity would take the fight to the invaders, even if victory seemed unlikely. Orders went out to mobilize all available resources, and factories worked around the clock to complete the warships. Pilots trained tirelessly, preparing for what would undoubtedly be the most dangerous mission of their lives. Rachel Dawson found herself summoned to Washington, D.C. for a briefing on the operation. When she entered the conference room, she was greeted by familiar faces, including Jack Morgan, who had been invited to provide technical insights on Project Phoenix. Their eyes met briefly, and Rachel offered a small nod of acknowledgement. Though they hadn't spoken directly, she admired his dedication to protecting humanity. Admiral Hayes outlined the plan. A fleet of hybrid warships would launch a surprise attack on the Xylari mothership, targeting its engines and weapon systems. Fighter squadrons, including Rachel's, would escort the ships, engaging enemy cruisers and drawing fire away from the main force. Success depended on speed, precision, and sheer audacity. "You'll be outnumbered," Hayes warned. "But if we can cripple their flagship, it'll throw their entire operation into disarray." Rachel clenched her fists, feeling a mix of excitement and dread. This was humanity's chance to turn the tide, but failure would mean annihilation. Still, she didn't hesitate when given the opportunity to volunteer. "Count me in," she said firmly. As preparations continued, Jack and Sarah raced against time to finalize the shield upgrades. Test runs showed promising results, but glitches persisted. Late one night, as they reviewed data from the latest simulation, Jack noticed something unusual, an anomaly in the energy flow that suggested a potential flaw. "What if we reroute part of the excess energy into secondary buffers?" he suggested, sketching out a diagram. "It might stabilize the system without compromising performance." Sarah studied the idea, nodding slowly. "It's risky, but worth a try." They implemented the change and ran another test. This time, the shield held steady, even under extreme stress. Relief washed over them both as they realized they'd cracked the problem. With this breakthrough, the hybrid warships cut through the void of space like blades slicing through darkness. Their sleek designs were a testament to humanity's ingenuity, blending advanced human engineering with reverse-engineered alien technology. Pilots in their fighter jets formed tight formations around the fleet, ready to engage any enemy ships that crossed their path. Rachel Dawson led her squadron with precision, her eyes scanning the horizon for signs of trouble. The Xylari mothership loomed ahead, its massive bulk casting an ominous shadow over the battlefield. As they approached, Admiral Hayes' voice crackled over the comm system. "All units, prepare for engagement. Fighter squadrons, you know your roles. Protect the warships at all costs." Rachel repeated the order to her team, her tone calm but firm. "Stay sharp. Watch each other's backs. We've trained for this." The tension was palpable. Every pilot knew the stakes. Failure meant not just their deaths, but potentially the end of humanity's resistance. Still, there was no time for fear. The Xylari fleet had already begun mobilizing, smaller cruisers breaking off from the mothership to intercept the incoming force. Lasers streaked across the blackness as both sides opened fire. Rachel's jet weaved through a barrage of energy blasts, her reflexes honed by countless hours of training. She locked onto a cruiser and fired a missile, watching as it struck true, sending shards of metal spiraling into space. Cheers erupted over the radio as other pilots reported hits, but the celebration was short-lived. Reinforcements poured in, overwhelming the human fighters. "Stick to the plan," Rachel shouted, dodging another volley of shots. "Keep them distracted." Her squadron obeyed, luring enemy ships away from the warships. It was a dangerous game of cat and mouse, with every move calculated to buy precious seconds for the larger vessels to reach their target. Explosions lit up the void as human and alien forces clashed, turning the cold emptiness of space into a fiery battleground. Back on one of the warships, Jack Morgan monitored the shield systems from the command center. His heart raced as he watched, readouts displaying the strain on the energy barriers. Project Phoenix had been pushed to its limits during testing, but nothing could fully prepare him for the chaos of actual combat. Alien weapons pounded against the shields, causing alarms to blare intermittently. "Shields holding at 60%, Sarah Bennett announced, her voice steady despite the tension. She stood beside Jack, her hands flying over the controls as she adjusted power allocations to reinforce weak points. Jack nodded, focusing intently on his own console. "Redirect auxiliary power to Section 3. If those shields fail, we're done for." Sarah complied without hesitation, rerouting energy reserves to stabilize the barrier. For now, the shields held, but Jack knew they couldn't endure indefinitely. Every second counted. Meanwhile, aboard the flagship Odyssey, Admiral Hayes coordinated the assault. The warship's primary objective was to disable the Xylari mothership's engines, crippling its ability to maneuver or retreat. Engineers worked feverishly to recalibrate targeting systems, ensuring maximum damage with minimal risk to the fleet. As the Odyssey closed in on its target, Hayes gave the order to fire. A salvo of plasma torpedoes launched from the ship's cannons, streaking toward the mothership. Several hit their mark, tearing through the alien vessel's hull and igniting massive explosions. Cheers erupted among the crew, but Hayes remained focused. "Don't let up. Keep firing until those engines are scrap metal," the Xylari responded, with fury, unleashing a relentless barrage of firepower. The Odyssey shuddered under the impact, its shields flickering dangerously. Jack gripped the edge of his console, sweat dripping down his face. He exchanged a glance with Sarah, who nodded, grimly. They both understood what failure would mean, not just for the mission but for Earth itself. On the front lines, Rachel's squadron fought valiantly, drawing fire away from the warships. One by one, enemy cruisers fell, their wreckage floating, lifelessly in space. But losses mounted on both sides. A nearby explosion rocked Rachel's jet, sending her spinning out of control. Alarms screamed in her ears as she struggled to regain stability. "You okay, Captain?" came a concerned voice over the radio. "I'm fine," Rachel replied through gritted teeth, straightening her craft. "Focus on the mission." She scanned the battlefield, searching for weaknesses in the enemy formation. Her gaze landed on a cluster of cruisers guarding the mothership's flank. If they could take those out, it might create an opening for the warships to deliver the final blow. "Delta Squad, follow me," she commanded, banking sharply toward the enemy. Her team obeyed, weaving between laser beams and debris as they closed in on their target. Missiles streaked from their wings, striking the cruisers with devastating force. One exploded spectacularly, its fragments scattering across the void. Another wobbled, disabled but still intact. Rachel lined up her sights and fired again, finishing. "Hit off. Good work, Delta," she said, breathing heavily. "Now fall back and regroup." As the battle raged on, intelligence reports revealed something unexpected. The Xylari weren't just fighting to conquer, they were harvesting resources from Earth. Satellites detected mining operations in remote regions, extracting minerals and water to fuel their fleet. Worse yet, intercepted transmissions hinted at experiments involving human DNA, suggesting the invaders sought to enhance their own biology using genetic material from Earth's population. News of these discoveries spread quickly, igniting outrage across the globe. Resistance movements redoubled their efforts, determined to stop the invaders' exploitation of their planet. In cities under occupation, civilians staged mass protests, refusing to cooperate with their oppressors. Underground networks smuggled supplies and information, keeping the fight alive even in the darkest corners of the world. Back in orbit, the tide began to turn. The sustained assault on the Xylari mothership paid off as critical systems failed one by one. Its engines sputtered and died, leaving the behemoth adrift in space. With their flagship immobilized, the remaining alien ships faltered, unable to coordinate effectively. Human forces seized the opportunity, pressing their advantage with renewed vigor. Rachel's squadron played a crucial role in the final push, taking out key targets and preventing reinforcements from reaching the mothership. By the time the last cruiser fell, the Xylari fleet was in disarray. Admiral Hayes gave the order to withdraw, knowing they'd achieved their goal. The mothership may have been crippled, but humanity had paid a heavy price. Dozens of pilots had lost their lives and several warships had been destroyed. As the surviving fleet limped back toward Earth, Rachel allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She stared out at the stars, thinking about the friends she'd lost and the battles yet to come. Victory here didn't mean the war was over. It only bought them time. Still, she felt a flicker of hope. Against all odds, humanity had struck a decisive blow. On the ground, Jack and Sarah received news of the operation's success. Though exhausted, they celebrated quietly, knowing their contributions had made a difference. Project Phoenix had proven its worth, protecting the fleet long enough to complete the mission. But neither of them rested for long. There was still work to be done. In the days that followed, global morale soared. News of the counteroffensive inspired millions, reinforcing the belief that humanity could prevail. Resistance fighters grew bolder, launching coordinated attacks on Xylari supply lines and occupied zones. Scientists and engineers continued innovating, developing new technologies to aid the fight. Even ordinary citizens found ways to contribute, whether by volunteering or simply spreading messages of hope. But amidst the celebrations, sobering realities remained. The Xylari still controlled vast swaths of territory, and their ground forces showed no signs of retreating. Intelligence suggested they were preparing for a new strategy, one that involved direct oppression rather than outright annihilation. Cities under their rule became prisons, with curfews enforced brutally and dissent crushed mercilessly. Rachel and her squadron returned to base, weary but resolute. They knew the next phase of the war would require even greater sacrifices. Training intensified as replacements arrived, eager to join the fight. Rachel took them under her wing, teaching them everything she'd learned. Survival depended on teamwork, adaptability, and sheer determination. For Jack and Sarah, the focus shifted to improving Project Phoenix further. While the current version had succeeded in protecting the fleet, they knew it needed enhancements to handle prolonged engagements. Jack pored over schematics late into the night, brainstorming ways to increase efficiency while reducing strain on the system. Sarah worked tirelessly alongside him, running simulations and testing prototypes. "We can't afford to rest," Jack said one evening, rubbing his bloodshot eyes. "They'll come back stronger. We need to be ready." Sarah nodded, handing him a cup of coffee. "We will be, together." Across the planet, humanity prepared for the challenges ahead. Factories churned out weapons and supplies, scientists developed new strategies, and ordinary people refused to give up. The Xylari had underestimated Earth, but they were learning fast. The coming days would test humanity's resolve like never before. Still, one truth remained unshaken. Earth belonged to humanity, and they weren't going down without a fight.